the war in Ukraine. A moment ago, in response to Mr. Weiler, you spoke about the economic consequences of the war. You talked about the impact on the global economy. We've had witness after witness, expert after expert, economist after economist come into our committee over the past couple of years and talk about how the war in Ukraine has been, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been one of the primary drivers of food inflation and energy inflation around the world that Canadians face at the grocery store and that they face at the pump when they go to fill up their car with gas. So it's touching Canadians economically every day, as you alluded to a few moments ago. But as you've heard me say in the House, it's also, I believe that Ukraine's victory is vital to Canada's security, and that's why we have, and I believe, all members in this House, and we need to support the Ukrainian people with what they need until they win, until they achieve a decisive victory. Traditionally, the issue of support for Ukraine has been unanimous in the House. I think traditionally, to be frank, traditionally political parties in Canada kind of trip over each other to try to show that they are the strongest supporters of Ukraine. I think recently we've seen that over the past year and a half, we've seen that unanimity erode. So can you explain to folks, to my constituents in Etobicoke Centre and just Canadians listening, the importance of supporting Ukraine?
Yeah, I can. And thank you very much, Ivana, for your question and your hard work. And I did start with a recognition of the historic role that Prime Minister Mulroney played when it came to recognizing Ukrainian independence. His funeral is on Saturday, and I think it's important that that aspect of his work be recognized by by Canadians. Ukrainians have recognized it. Actually, the Bloc, I don't know if Gabrielle is still with us, in the Bloc's tribute to Prime Minister Mulroney, one of the things that was mentioned is that he was awarded the Order of Yaroslav Mudry, Yaroslav the Wise, by Ukraine, and that is in recognition of his historic role. He called me up right after the war started, and he reminded me of his role. He told me the whole story. He was with President Bush. And President Bush wasn't so keen on Canada to come out so strong and so early recognizing Ukraine, but he did it anyway. I respect him for that. And then he said to me, you know what? Canada has always supported Ukraine. And I'll use slightly unparliamentary language because I'm going to quote the former prime minister. He said, you goddamn well better do everything you can. Make sure you do. And I do want to say, I think that Mr. Chambers was maybe a staffer in Harper's government. I don't know if that's true. And I do remember conversations with Mr. Harper about support for Ukraine. He was also a Canadian prime minister who supported Ukraine. I do actually really sincerely hope that today's Conservative Party finds its way back to the traditional cross-party support for Ukraine that we have enjoyed in this House. It's a question of democracy versus dictatorship, and it's also a question of the pocketbooks of Canadians. Because as long as Vladimir Putin is able to wreak havoc, that causes real problems for the global economy and for Canadians.
Thank you, Minister. I believe I have about a minute and a half, Chair. Minister, I'm going to change topics here, if I may. We know that the main reason, we've heard this from expert after expert have come to our committee, the main reason that housing prices in Canada are so high is because of a shortage of housing supply. And so bottom line is we've heard person after person come into the committee and say we need to build more housing, we need to build it quickly, and they've given us advice on how we should do that. Could you speak to how the government is working to increase housing supply across the country with the goal of making housing more affordable for Canadians?
Of course. I do think that housing is the central challenge in Canada right now. That's one reason we shouldn't have underused housing in Canada, and we shouldn't have homes lying empty when Canadians need homes. And it would be good if the Conservatives shared that view. What we also really need to do is get more homes built faster. And we're doing a lot to make that happen. I've talked about the Housing Accelerator Fund. That we have deals in place for the whole fund as it currently exists. That's going to get 100,000 more homes built. We have topped up the apartment construction loan program with $15 billion. There's now a total of $40 billion in that program. That will get 100,000 more homes built. We have lifted the GST on purpose-built rental, and in this measure, we will lift the GST from new co-op housing developments. Really, really important. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, which was mentioned earlier today, does have a role to play, too, in getting the infrastructure built that we need to get more homes built. And I do just want to offer a factual correction to, maybe I'll be generous and say, a misunderstanding that seemed to be underlying some of the Conservative questioning. The Canada Infrastructure Bank, of course, is the responsibility of the Minister for Housing and Infrastructure. It's not part of the finance responsibilities.
Thank you, Minister.
MP Baker, and now to MP Samari, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I very much enjoyed this exchange on the interests of the Ukrainian people and that we need to fight for them too. Now, on the question of housing, I'd like to talk about access to property. Here we're in a dramatic situation. Interest rates remain high, even if the midterm prospects are more encouraging. But over and above that, the price of property is continuing to rise. So it's a whole generation who's not able to buy a condo or a home or have access to property. There was the first home buyer savings account which has been set up, but it hasn't turned things around. So, Madam, what are you going to say to that generation, Finance Minister, and what are you going to do? Gabriel, sincerely, thank you very much for that question, because I believe that you've really hit the nail on the head there. That's the most important issue. We've discussed lots of important matters today, but this question for me really is the key question, the most important one. Access to housing for young people and access for those who wish to buy a property. So having the possibility to be able to buy a property, I think that's extraordinarily important. We need to ensure that Canada is a country and Quebec is a province where if you work hard, if you've got a good job, then it should be possible for you to buy a home. That is why we have set up the first home buyer savings account. So it's tax-free. That helps you to buy this first property. It's working. There's over 500,000 accounts that have been opened since April last year when this was first launched. So we can see that there's a real desire for young people to buy this first home. So that's why we created this new tax-free savings account for them. But I agree with you that we still have work to do on this. And we have to continue to build more homes. But at the same time, we have to come up with creative, innovative solutions so that we can really allow young people who want to do so to be able to buy their first home. I really think that's fundamental, to give them hope and give them confidence in our society. So thank you very much for that question. I'd like to reassure you that we are certainly working in that direction, and we understand that there is still plenty of work to be done. Thank you very much for that. Now, on another subject. There was a request from the bloc to not create two classes of seniors. There was an increase in the OAS as of 75 years of age, and we're asking for this to be as of 65 years of age. And my colleague Adrienne Larouche has brought forward C319 that deals with this. That was the aim, and it was supported in second reading, and it left the committee with unanimous consent. All parties, all MPs from all parties voted in favour of this bill. So is the government currently examining this bill C319 to increase the OS pension as of 65 years of age? And do you agree with the unanimity expressed by the legislators? And would you be able to support this also? Thank you very much for that question, and thank you for your work on this particular file, the work accomplished by the bloc. I think that all of us around the table understand the importance of being certain that seniors in Canada and seniors in Quebec actually are able to have a decent, safe retirement with dignity. There are parents or grandparents. They're the people who have built our country, and they need to have a decent retirement with dignity. That is why we have added an extra support for the most elderly parts of the population, because we understand that they have more costly, more expensive needs. That is why I'm happy to see that we've increased support for that age group. And now we're adding in more support for them with the dental benefit. Joanne mentioned that earlier. And we've started once again with the most elderly parts of our population because, specifically, we understand that they need more support. Thank you very much for that. Now, on another subject to round off, this doesn't affect many people. It's a small detail, if you like, if we put it within the context of the whole economy and of these sectors of activity, but it would make a big difference. And here I'm referring to artisanal producers based on maple sugar or small fruit. Because of the WTO attack from Australia on wine and the question of how to define wine, we've been able to exclude the cider and the producers, but all the other producers that were not actually covered by the action brought in the WTO, for example, such as pear cider or raspberry wine. These small producers are niche producers, and they have to pay the full excise tax, and it's really having a big impact on their competitiveness and even affecting their survival. So could you look at that in your department and try and harmonise excise tax to do the same thing as with cider producers?
And I need a very short answer, Minister, before we go to our final questioner.
Alors,
well, because of what our chair has just said, I will just say that I'll follow up on this and we can talk about it afterwards. Thank you so much.
And now to MP Blakey. I said our final questioner, and then I'll ask members, I guess, if we'll have UC to have a question from MP Maurice. Yeah, okay. MP Blakey.
Thank you very much. So one of the things that jumps out in the estimates, I think, is if you look at the voted program expenditure in 22-23, the expenditure was $329 million. The budgeted amounts in 23-24 are $128 million. The expenditures to date are $420 million. The budgeted amount for 24-25 is $145 million. This kind of brought me back to my early days as Treasury Board critic. I suspect